Thanks, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to ask my co-hosts to maybe keep checking the waiting room and let people in. And I know that Marianne's going to keep putting the link to the slides in the chat. So if you're just joining us, you want to jump in the slides. We are going to work in the slides a bit today in some breakout rooms. And you're going to want to look at slide number 2 and click on that link to sign in. And it's especially important if you want sketches. I'll be sending an email tomorrow with the sketch information. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. I always appreciate your time and your enthusiasm. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to do a little icebreaker, starting with a Jamboard. And we would like to know, thinking about streamlining our lessons. If we're thinking of streamlining, it's probably because some things are taking us a little too long. So on the Jamboard, I'd like you to think about which lesson phase. So that we have those 5 phases to our lessons. Which lesson phase takes you the longest and why do you think that is? And then think about which parts of each unit take you the longest and they just kind of seem to drag on. And so if you click on that Jamboard, it looks like this, and there are 2 boards. So the first one is which lesson phase takes you the longest. And I included a little image there of the MyStar instructional model as a quick reminder of those 5 phases in each lesson. And then which part of the unit seems to drag on? Is it the unit opener? Is it the unit closer? Is it those middle lessons? You know, what do we do throughout the unit that's seeming to slow you down? So go ahead and jump in there and let us know what you're thinking. I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
I have no idea how to do that.
Thanks, Ashley. Ashley, just put the slides link in the chat again in case for some reason you're not finding it. All right, looking like longest is maybe share your ideas is kind of a common one. Uncover, sometimes connect, sometimes the anchors. Yeah, you know, every lesson's a little bit different. Yeah, some of our lessons do have double uncover shares. If there's a double uncover share, it's usually to prevent it from being 2 lessons, 2 separate lessons. All right, the uncover. Okay, so in general, probably not the anchor and the check your progress, but it's that middle stuff where all the lab activities and the talking and applications and stuff are going on. All right, and the parts that are seeming to drag, the middle lessons, depends on the unit. Some of those long middle lessons, yeah. The unit challenge and closer, yeah, that we have some ideas of how to make that go faster for sure. All right, another minute or 2. Go ahead and add what you think there. The unit itself, yeah. I will tell you, I've seen, I follow a lot of NGSS Twitter topics, and I've seen people talk about units dragging on for Open SciEd and some of the other NGSS aligned curricula also. Some of it is inherent. It's, you know, the nature of the beast. If you let kids discover things, it takes some time. But we do have some veterans here who have some ideas to make things move a little faster. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the slides. You're welcome to continue contributing there if you'd like. But in the meantime, let's go back and take a look here at what we have for you today. So our outline today, we're going to give you some tips and tricks to streamline the unit by lesson phase. So what can you do in the anchor, uncover, share, connect, and check your progress to kind of speed things up. And then we have some ideas about that are kind of overall by the unit. What are some things that happen in the unit consistently that some tips and tricks to kind of condense that and make that flow a little faster. And then I threw together some sample lesson plans for an opening lesson, a middle lesson, and a unit closer. And they are probably a little more ideal than you're going to actually experience in real life, but they're probably a little more realistic than those times that are listed in the lesson plans. So, and throughout this, we're going to ask you to kind of stop and think and talk to some people in a breakout room about what they're experiencing and see if you can learn a little bit from your colleagues also. And then we'll also hang around at the end if you have extra questions or conversation. So I'm so happy today. You all know me, I'm assuming. I'm Chris Gear. I'm the MyStar Professional Learning Coordinator, and I am a recently retired middle school science teacher. I taught MyStar for about 5 years before I retired. With me today from the MyStar staff, Marianne is here. Marianne Simones is here. She's our program organizer, our program director. Steph Tubman is here, just kind of hanging out. She's our curriculum department, our curriculum development chairperson. And they're also listening because we always listen to our teachers. One of the things I loved about MyStar when I was working with them as a teacher is they really do listen to us. And we're always looking for ways that we can incorporate some of these ideas and help teachers with things that are concerning for them. And the length of the units is a consistent concern. So Marianne and Steph are here, and also our superstar veteran MyStar teachers, Ashley Poole from Kalamazoo and Megan Throm from Berkeley, and Monica Harvey, who also even more recently retired, and she has joined our MyStar professional learning team. And so Ashley, Megan, and Monica, along with some input from me, we're gonna walk you through the things that we've come up with, and we may even learn some things from you also today. So we're going to start by talking about streamlining by lesson phase. And so we're going to go through each lesson phase, and this veteran team is going to kind of jump in and give you tips and tricks about each lesson phase. And so I'm going to turn it over right now to Ashley, who's going to talk to you a little bit about ways to make that anchor phase move faster.
Thanks, Chris. So your anchors should always be really short. I often will set a timer to keep it from going over. And some of the ways that I keep to that time is avoiding giving them any information. So I don't give away the answers and, get them thinking about things. I just want to assess where their prior knowledge is at. And then using, I want to hear from 3 people. Some people use popsicle sticks. Others just pick random kids, but just giving that explicit, I don't want to hear everybody. I want to hear from 3 people, just so your discussion isn't dragging out. Another way that if I do want to hear from multiple people, I use a program called Pear Deck, where students can respond and everybody responds on what they think. So if you do want to hear from everyone, a program like that, there's also Nearpod that does a similar thing, is a good way to get thinking from everyone where you're still not dragging out the whole conversation. Another thing that can help keep it concise is going over the difference between a personal story and something that actually contributes to the discussion of the science concept. Just so you cut out those, you know, one time my brother did this and that was a force, and you know, hold those off for another time. I always have the anchor and the next lesson also ready and prepped to go after the check your progress. It tends to work out that a check your progress usually needs half of a class period, especially for those embedded assessment ones. And an anchor, if it needs 10 to 15 minutes, you can just tuck it in right at the end of the class period. I know some teachers who will use that time as, you know, oh, well, I can't start a whole nother lesson. But you really can, because the anchor is just really getting those ideas out there, and not getting into the meat of anything. You don't need them to remember it the next day. And if you do want them to remember the next day, you just say, hey, remember when we did this yesterday? And, you know, just kind of reactivate that. So yeah, to summarize, it shouldn't be very long. I know this isn't on the slide, but another thing that I've done before is if it's an actual activity, I just do it as a demo. There are a couple where they're supposed to, you know, push and pull on each other. If it's a big class and you know that's going to take twice as long as a different class, then just do it as a demonstration. Have 2 students do it in the front rather than everybody try it on their own.
All right, thanks, Ashley. And by the way, we are going to go through the phases, and then we're going to stop and let you think about, in a breakout room, kind of hash out what you've heard and generate some questions, and then we'll do the same for the unit. So if you have some questions that you're formulating, hang on to them, and we're going to give you a chance to get that stuff out. All right, uncover and share. Megan's going to talk to us about that.
Hi, everybody. So as we kind of think, I think the uncover and share phase are probably the areas where people often say that they spend the most amount of time, particularly, and it depends on the activity for the uncover. I would say for me, one of the things that I make sure I do the most, and I kind of stole from our math curriculum, is I do a lot of job assignment. So everybody has those assigned jobs. I have that kind of set up, ready to go. And I'll do that for both share and uncover. So whether it's you're responsible for reporting this part on a whiteboard or in a Jamboard, when we are doing the share. So to help that process go a little bit faster, same thing for whenever there's an activity in an uncover, if there's like a lab that they need to do, that there are assigned jobs to help that process go a little bit more quickly. And I would say too that, you know, if it's your first time going through, yep, your uncovers are going to take extra long until you know, just like with anything, right? My 7th hour is faster than my 1st hour. So you kind of figure out those places to tweak along the way. So there is a lot of dependence on the actual activity, but the jobs help a lot. When it comes to the share, and if you're doing modeling and whiteboarding, setting time limits and accountability. So those jobs can really help with the accountability. Some people like to limit how many markers, because you do want to make sure it's not an art project. So depending if you've had time to do some of those system models off the shelf lesson beforehand, depending on how much modeling they've done, I think 6th grade sometimes spends a lot more time getting used to those norms. And by the time students have gone through MyStar for, you know, if you can, for 3 years, in 8th grade, they've kind of started to get a little more used to some of those modeling norms. I also almost always, depending on the model, provide a starter. So the picture that I put in here is an example of one of those. So I had given them the starter. It actually started in a Jamboard. So I made everybody had the same background they're working on. I have just found that really helps to make sure, that students aren't just drawing anything, but they're really focused on what the model is supposed to be about. It also really helps when we have our compare contrast conversations, that we're not spending too much time making sense of everybody's different ways of representing what happened in the uncover. We all have some common thing that we're starting from. So it just kind of cuts down a little bit on that amount of time it takes for groups to maybe share out. This example as well, when we did our share as a way to kind of have it go a little bit quicker, to do our consensus model, every group looked at a different group's like Jamboard, and they shared the best component or the most accurate component that I added to our consensus. So like that picture there is actually, you know, I took a screenshot of the Jamboard and had it up on the screen in class, and I was adding what they were sharing out from their the models they were viewing. So that just kind of helped that and helped keep people on task to make sure that they were really focusing on the most accurate parts of the model versus sometimes when you ask them to give feedback on each other's, they'll talk more about like, oh, it looks nice, not the accuracy of the science concept. So that has kind of helped that move along. Also, if you can, and I know this really depends on the Uncover, but if you can start the share kind of similarly, right? To starting the anchor off after a check your progress. If you can start off, maybe it's not the full where you're going to do the whiteboarding after the Uncover, but starting with some of those questions to get them thinking about it so that the next day, if you are going to go to the more informal, you have some of that already started and embedded, and that might just start getting things going a little faster. Obviously, share is probably the time when it's most appropriate to have those longer discussions, I think, but choosing which routines, depending on the share. I also know you don't know when the share is going to go long. I got surprised by one last week where all of a sudden this debate, I thought that we kind of had a good concept of whether a neutral trait or a beneficial trait would become common in a population. And it was a great debate. And I think they really got a great understanding. So, right, those are sometimes the times you go, all right, we're going to let this drag out because it's obviously important. But definitely, so you don't want to skip that share phase, but there are some of those ways you can limit it. And then thinking about the vocabulary as well, that can be a place where maybe you can cut down on some time. Developing the concept is more important than developing the exact vocabulary. Not that vocabulary and science words aren't important, but you can maybe limit the amount of time that you're spending on students developing those vocabulary terms.
All right, thanks, Megan. Monica is going to talk to us about what some of the things that she's done in the Connect to make that move a little more quickly.
Hi, everybody. So there's a couple ways that you can go about making sure that you're hitting the Connect phase, because if they can't link back the science to the unit challenge that they're trying to solve and the problem that they're trying to solve, they kind of get lost in the activities. And we want them in the science that they're doing to have meaning in solving the initial problem. So the Connect phase is something that I would never skip. MyStar provides unit challenge organizers that some people fill out portions of. So if you want to pre-fill one or two of the sections for speed, like you could make sure that it's already copied in there and then have students add to that. That's a way to speed things up. Another way that we've done in Rochester is using something called evolution of an idea. And you can see a sample here. I like this because it really brings them back to the bubble map. So you can see in the first box, they're asking students to put in what bubble map question were we even working on in lesson 4. And then at the end, it asks them where we should go next. So it's a perfect reminder to the students and to you that you need to go back into that bubble map and kind of see what the path is. The breakdown of what did we learn and asking specific questions also helps kind of guide them through what we did in the anchor, uncover, and share phases. And then the second on the right-hand side, it kind of asks them some prompts in leading them toward a solution. So what would your solution be if you had to do it right now? What would you say? What else do you need to know? And it really does lead them back to the bubble map and back to the fact that their questions should be driving this whole thing. Even though you're steering, they're in the bus and they need to feel like they're in charge of their learning. So don't skip this. You could do this in chunks. You could have them fill out the bubble map question that they're answering at the beginning of the lesson, like they do the anchor and then they write down the bubble map question that they're going to be looking at in this lesson. After they do the uncover and share, they could be answering what we did. So this can be done as chunks in bell work, maybe not leaving it all until the end. So those are just maybe a couple of different ideas on how to make sure that the science is connected to the problem that kids are trying to solve.
All right, and Monica is going to talk to us in a little bit about how she uses digital science notebooks too. And so she'll talk about those group slides in a little bit. Ashley has another idea for unit challenge organizer.
Yeah, so one of the things I've done mostly to keep kids accountable, especially in those classes where, you know, you've just got that couple of kids in each group or that whole group that just, they get so off task that it takes 3 times as long. One of the ways to keep them accountable is to either make a Google slide deck that goes along with this, and then they each respond on their own. The whole group can work together to complete it, but each person needs to draw it on the slide. Or I also use the program I was talking about earlier, Pear Deck, where they click through it as they go. And so I'll make the whole unit challenge organizer into a slide deck, give them the link, and then, you know, say, okay, today you need to complete slides 8 through 7 or 8 through 11. And they know, okay, even if my whole group does the work and we get through this in the right amount of time, if I don't have my piece done as well with the same thing, I'm going to be held accountable in my participation grade or my assessment grade or, you know, whatever it is. And then we just keep going back to the same one, and they can always flip back to see, okay, what did I do before? How does this connect to the part that I'm supposed to do now? Especially in ones like 7.2a that's up there right now, where they have to go back to that freak out meter constantly. It helps to just have it all in one place. It's not paper that's getting lost. Nobody is having to go grab a group folder. You know, you just cut down on those little time sucks that occur so often where students have to find something that they were given 3 weeks ago and they have no idea where it is, or the rings on their binder have broken, so it has fallen out and looks like it got in a fight with a vacuum cleaner. So that's one of the ways that I do that is putting it all in one big Pear Deck or one big Google slide deck and having them complete a little bit at a time. Hold them accountable. It keeps us from losing all of our papers, keeps us from having to pass things out, and gets that all done at once.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to talk to you just briefly about check your progress, and then we'll put you in breakout rooms and have you do a little discussions with some of your colleagues. So some of the brainstorming that we did, we came up with some ideas to make check your progress flow a little faster, even though it's usually a fairly quick part of the lesson. Some MyStar teachers do use Google Forms for at least part of the check your progress to make that easy grading and a quick turnaround response for kids. You could use the check your progress as bell work or a warm up. You know, it could be the first thing kids do when they walk in. If you finish Connect the day before, just go ahead and start with check your progress. Usually a check your progress is going to be 10 to 15 minutes, and half of that is passing stuff out and collecting it. So it really should be a pretty quick activity. Some of our MyStar teachers on occasion will look at the check your progress and consider giving it to small groups. And that can speed things up a little bit. You know, some groups may have kids who are better readers, better modelers, et cetera. And that can speed up the check your progress. It doesn't give you that individual assessment, but it does help kids work through that. They're working through the content in a different context, and they're practicing that sense making process, which is what we want them to experience and check your progress. I used to pass out the check your progress, and I'd have some kids who were done in 5 minutes and some kids who needed 10 or 15 minutes. And so, you know, on the board, the assignment would be to move to that kind of wrap up piece of check your progress. I'd have them pull out their personal bubble maps and review the questions. Did we answer any of your personal questions? Do you want to add or subtract or edit any of your personal questions? Our newer units have things called navigation guides in them, which help you if you need to generate new questions for the next lesson because nothing on your bubble map is kind of matching. There's a little navigation guide form that's a quick, easy thing that kids can fill out, kind of like that evolution of an idea that Monica uses. And so that would be something that kids could be assigned to do after they've done check your progress, rather than making it a whole separate process. This took me about 3 MyStar units the first year I taught to figure this out, because I was always, it was like being a new first year teacher, and I was always barely ahead of where I was with the kids. But if I plan to have that anchor ready to go, you can do check your progress and an anchor pretty easily in the same class period, with very few exceptions. And so that was one of the things that just was like, after about 3 months of this, I was like, oh, I should have, even though it's the next lesson, I've got this 15 or 20 minutes that I'm wasting all the time. I should have that anchor ready to go and kind of cram it in there. We would suggest that you don't, I quite often, when I do my new teacher training, one of the things people ask is, what can I skip? I hear it's really long. What can I skip? We suggest you don't skip check your progress. It is important for kids to have that practice doing 3-dimensional assessment, that practice doing that sense making process, and they get to see the concepts in a third context, which we also know is really important for learning. So we ask that you don't skip the check your progress phase. Make sure kids are linking the bubble map questions to the next lesson. That's really important for student engagement and kids feeling like they're driving their learning. But think about some of these classroom management tips that could tighten that up a little bit. All right, as promised, we're going to put you in a couple of breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask you to have somebody in your breakout room, in your team room, record some of the discussion, but we'd like you to go ahead and talk to some of the people here with us today about when we talked about streamlining phases over the last 10 or 15 minutes. What did you see that you liked or hear that you liked? What does this make you think about? And what are you still wondering? And we are going to use some of your wonders to set up some topic-specific breakout rooms at the very end. So what did you see? Maybe what did you see that you like, that seems like it might work? What are you thinking about? And what are you wondering? All right, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everybody's back now. Thanks so much. All right, we are happy to see all of your thoughts and questions here. And some of this we may touch on in our next little chunk here about unit streamlining. And if not, we're going to get to it when we do the breakout rooms at the end. So thanks for your thinking and wondering here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about unit streamlining. And so there are some different ways that we have brainstormed that some of us use to some of those unit processes that happen throughout the unit, some ways to keep that moving along a little more quickly. And so Ashley's going to talk to us a little bit about how to speed up that unit summary table process.
Right. So when I first started teaching MyStar, I hated the unit summary table because it took forever. It felt like the kids were just really struggling, and that's part of what took forever. So I've done some things over the last 6 years teaching MyStar that really make it, first, a lot faster, and second, a good assessment. For those who are asking about grading, this is something I do grade because it's a mid-lesson assessment. You should be able to explain at this point the basics of the lesson question. So one of the things I do is I completely fill in row A and B for them. And I tell them, this is the spot where if you get this back later and you didn't do well, you can look back here to remember, oh yeah, this is the lab we did and this is what we saw happen. And we don't have to waste that class time writing it in. Because what found that we ended up just doing it together because they weren't competent enough in 6th and 7th grade to analyze it themselves. So basically all they have to do is see. I've also completely eliminated row D because they come up with so many products during the connect phase that it just felt redundant. And a lot of times the question for row D was often almost verbatim what row C was, just in a new context. So now it's just row A and B is pre-filled. Row C has lines for them to write. It has the question right there in row C. And then I've also put the gotta have checklist in as a row itself. And that enables me to, you know, you have 10 minutes to do this in class. If you don't finish it in class, you can take it home. You have the checklist with you. You know what I expect out of this. And if you click on the link down in the bottom bullet, you can see an example of one that I've done with 6th grade. It's literally a checklist. I also put their vocabulary words in there that we've covered during the lesson so that they know, okay, I need to use these words. If there are a lot of words, I tell them, you know, you have to use 3 of these words in your explanation to give me a really good explanation. And it does take longer in 6-1 and in 7-1. But by about halfway through the unit, they get what I expect. They get what a good answer looks like. You know, I've gone through and modeled it with them. They've gotten feedback. They've improved their work based on that feedback. And now it's actually a pretty good assessment at that point. So that's one thing that I do, or a couple of things that I do. I also do vocabulary. I actually do it before we do the summary table. And I do a modified Frayer model as homework every week. They have 6 words. Mine doesn't do the examples and non-examples. It does definition, use the word in a sentence, and draw a picture or write an example. And that really just helps them practice it during their, you know, time they're not in class. And I can tell if they have understood the words in that time. There are other vocabulary tools in the My Star thinking routines, but that's the one I usually lean on most heavily. I also, someone said in the breakout rooms that they wonder about, you know, how to not front load the vocab for kids, just giving it to them because 6th graders don't get it. And what I do to combat that is in the lesson slides, I will put the guiding question, and then right after that, the slide of the vocab word that goes with that question. So they are still discovering the word in their own way. They just don't have the vocabulary to put to it yet. So we go over that and I say, hey guys, there's actually a word for that. Here's the word. And then they write it in their Uncover, or I'll put a notes page in their lesson packet so that they have a place to record it, to model it, to add it to their model that they already have, depending on how the lesson is set up. So there are ways to work around it, to modify the curriculum and move things around in the slides and move things around in the summary table so that you're still getting solid scientific thinking out of them and assessment, but you're not spending quite as much time on it. It's still going to take a while because it is writing and they don't write quickly at all, but those are just a couple of the things I do.
Thanks, Ashley. Monica and Megan have some examples here of the unit summary table. Actually, this is Megan's slide. Sorry.
That's okay. I just want to make sure I don't want to jump in front of anybody.
Yeah, no.
So I changed the format of the summary table a little bit and changed it more to have it be this horizontal version, just because in all of their, like everything, they can kind of see all of the activities like in one, you know, column. And then I highlight that 3rd column, and I renamed it like we learned that because that is something, a prompt that we use a lot in claim evidence reasoning. As part of their reasoning, we want to start, and I kind of stole that from a previous My Star Learning series on CERs, that we always want to start with what was the big idea that we learned. So I just titled that column, I make it green, like this is the science concepts. And so I find then that's like their study guide. And I sometimes pre-fill out the activity we did, or I know my colleague next to 6th grade will somewhat pre-fill some of it up, but like with blanks. So there still is some work, right, that the students are having to do to remember, oh, what was that activity again? I do them digitally and we do them together as a class. But I do kind of lean a little bit, like I direct a little bit more of that, though we learned that column just to make, you know, I'll ask them to share, but then that is where we kind of develop the vocabulary or really solidify the vocabulary. I've gone back and forth on keeping that last column. I do try to keep it super brief, bullets, as quick as possible. I always tell students they can write whatever they want here. It's for them to use. I let them use their lesson summary tables or check your progress. So what I tell them is however, if you don't do anything on this, then you don't have anything to use for the check your progress. I usually do it, there's a couple places when you go into the MyStar lessons, it says to do lesson summary table. And I do it once, right? I don't come back to it multiple times. One time in each lesson, usually right before the check your progress. So I usually wait till after the connect is when I do it, and we're just kind of summarizing. I do also do a physical one in the room. So that's a picture of my current one. I have found that has helped me make sure that I am using we learned that's in the vocabulary much more often, and just using that consistency of some of the language. So those are those things.
Thanks, Megan. Now, Monica.
Now me. Okay, so I have been doing this a long time. I've been a middle school science teacher for over 30 years. I have tried every which way to get kids to organize their stuff. We've done interactive science notebooks, like the physical ones, binders. And what I was finding is that kids were losing stuff. My special ed kids, it was a nightmare. I would even hole punch, staple. When we did the interactive notebooks, I would shrink it so that it was the right size, and I would trim it all. And it took so much time to tape a piece of paper into the interactive notebook. I lost half of my classes time-wise because of just the organizing piece. And so when my district, we were lucky enough to go one-to-one, I'm like, I'm going to try this digital notebook thing. And I found that I saved so much time with not being at the copy machine, running out of copies, making things bigger or smaller, stapling. The custodians were very grateful because all of the tape that goes into an interactive notebook was not all over the tables. So there's a lot of reasons that I wanted to make this shift. There's a couple of benefits that a digital notebook brought to me that I was not thinking about. One is at the beginning of a unit, I made teams that would stay together for the entire unit, and they created a slide deck for the team. I didn't create it, the kids did. I gave them a template of what to follow, but they made it their own. So they had every kid on their team had access to the slide deck. The kids would put in, if we did a model, they would take a picture and put it in their team slide deck. If they had a discussion and there were points that they wanted to remember, they put it in their slide deck. So it became a home base for all of the discussion and products in the class that normally would have just been erased. And now we have it in the slide deck. The other thing that came out of it was that the kids set up a chart at the beginning of it so that every single week, a different kid was responsible for materials. So week one, if I'm the person that is responsible, then I'm going to be the one getting the whiteboard markers. I'm going to be cleaning up the area for my team. And I'm responsible for that week. I'm responsible for making sure everything gets into the slide deck. And I only have to do that maybe once for the entire unit, and then it's somebody else's turn. The kids really enjoy the collaboration of it. It helped kids that were absent know what was going on because pictures of the models that were created or a summary of the discussion that was had was recorded in the slide deck, so they had access to it. So, and they really started to get good about helping each other. How do I take a picture again with my Chromebook? How do I get it into the slide deck? And they really helped each other out. So that helped kind of solidify teams as well. The other thing that, before I get into the nuts and bolts of it, which is kind of what Chris has up right now, is the accessibility piece. So part of my job before I left Rochester was I was the science curriculum coach for middle school. And I was being contacted by learning consultants and special ed teachers in the different buildings because of the accessibility pieces. And we figured out that by having a digital record, that kids that forgot what they did in class and normally would have had to rely on a binder or a notebook, they could look in the digital record of what their team did. Oh yeah, that's what we did. I remember now. I even had teams that would take video of the experiment and put that in the digital notebook as well. So if I'm absent and I need to watch the video of what happened because there's some questions I had to answer, I have the video of what happened in my team slide deck. And as I was sharing those things with the special ed teachers, they were starting to think about some ways that this could be used with their special ed kids and even 504 kids, because there's always a team slide deck. There's always help. And it's not just me relying on my own stuff. I have a team that's helping record this. What you're looking at right now are some different examples of notebooks. And so the table of contents on the lower left there, I would keep a running record as inside of the template that I shared with the kids of all of the things that we did, and I would link a blank copy for their table of contents. So when the kids submitted their notebooks at the end of the unit, all of their assignments were linked in there as well. So they had almost a physical notebook, but in a digital form. The inheritance of traits, that is a team notebook. And so those are the kids that were on that team. They made a cover for it, and then they inserted pictures of the models like you can see on the bottom right. So it really became a collaborative tool, not just an individual notebook that they had to keep track of on their own. So I really enjoyed it. It was a big time saver. I did have kids that when they were absent, they would text their friends or their teammates and that say like, I know we're doing an experiment today. Can you guys make sure to remember to put the lab video in our notebook deck so I can take a look at it? And I really found that when kids were coming back into school, they were right on it. Like they didn't have to come up to me and say, what did I miss? Can I have the paper? Like it's all there. It was all in Google Classroom, but it was also all there in the digital science notebook that their team was keeping track of. So I think it was a beautiful tool. I was very happy with it. Sorry,
Thanks,
that was a lot.
Yeah, Monica did link examples, and I'm sure Monica will talk to you individually if you have questions about that at the end. The unit opener, that's our lesson 1. Megan has some ideas of how to streamline that.
So one of the things that like the first lesson should go pretty quickly, right? Like that first lesson, you are just introducing the unit challenge. It should not take a lot of time. I actually started a couple of years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago. I was really struggling with when we were working on, and I call it the driving question board versus bubble map. It's 8th graders. The bubble map is just a little kiddish for them, and driving question board kind of came from NGSX, but same thing, right? But I was struggling that because when we introduced the unit challenge first, they were writing specific questions for the unit challenge, not like some of the big, like broader questions. So I reversed the order. I have us do the driving question board first. Sometimes I change the unit question to a statement because sometimes they really struggle writing a question about a question. And I know that's a skill we're working on, but it's still just, man, it blows their minds sometimes. So just shifting it from a unit challenge question to like a problem statement has really helped them. And then I also provide some sentence starters because you'll have those kids who just go, I don't have any questions. I can't come up with a question. Well, start writing the sentence starter down then, right? Like at a bare minimum, start writing what's the relationship between, and we'll maybe point out like 2 terms in the, that are in that statement that they could write their question about. And yet usually just kind of helps get that, those questions going a little bit. So the sentence starters have really helped. And this is my guilty place. I am not great at coming back to it and having the questions drive. I will just own that. It's what I'm working on this year. So I have a physical one in the room. I have them do it on the sticky notes. I used to have them then record them all in their physical notebooks. That took way too long to me. I hated that day. I did. And so I switched it to where I now record their questions in, and I use the free version of Padlet because I just keep it for as long as the unit is, and then I get rid of it. So I have one Padlet that has every hour's questions in it. And so we'll visit that and we'll change the order of the questions, like, oh, we answered this one, we'll slide it down. Maybe we've already addressed that one. We'll type our responses in that we've come up with. But that has kind of helped move that process a little bit quicker. I know people have used Jamboard. That's another way, to digitize it, to kind of take up, instead of having the time of kids writing out all those questions in their notebook.
All right, thanks. And you'll note that we have some links in these slides, and those are there as resources. You of course have access to the slides now. So if you want to check out those resources later, that's what those links are for. All right, unit closer. So the unit closer lesson comes at the very end. And the first time I taught a MyStar unit, I was absolutely shocked because I was used to teaching where we'd go through all of the information, all of the science content. And then at the end, there would be a big project. I like to do something that was kind of place-based or project-based. But that project would take another 2 or maybe 3 weeks of kids working in teams now, because now they're creating this big project. MyStar is designed so that the kids are getting the artifacts, the pieces, the things that they need in the connect of every lesson. And so that unit closer really should just be a couple days. They're going to take the things that they've done in the connect in that unit challenge organizer, put it together into a product pretty quickly, present it and share it out. We do have some good ideas of how to even make that sharing a little faster. And so Megan and then Monica are going to talk a little bit about some of the ways they even speeded that up. The kids put it together, and then instead of having every group present. Megan, you want to talk about what you do?
Yeah, and again, like every unit's different, but if you so my link there is for the one I'm currently doing. It's the 8.1 unit on adaptation and natural selection, and students are working on this right now. It's the forcing you to make a copy. So for the division of labor, I have, and they also get a slide template that says this lesson goes on this slide, this lesson goes on this slide. I've put a couple of the prompts in there, but it does say clearly what needs to be on there. And then I also have already figured out, because some of my groups have 3 people, some have 4 people. So I've done the legwork of thinking about which slides are requiring a little more stuff and which ones have less. And so depending on your group, maybe sometimes there's 2 people, maybe somebody has to do 2 slides. And maybe somebody else only has to do 1, but that's maybe a meatier one. And I have done that work for you just to cut down on the argument, just to cut down a little bit on the, it's not fair. And, it's never going to be perfectly equal division of labor. But making them then also they have to fill out who is assigned to which slide before they start. And then the next step is, then you get that paper out. And so that, because it's amazing, they'll forget that they have everything on their paper, right? You're just kind of copying, maybe you're proofreading, right? And zhuzhing your answer up a little bit, but your stuff is done. So you should just be copying. So this, unit challenge is really only taking me 2 days to finish the whole final product. And we're not even spending the whole day on it, right? We're kind of reviewing for the test at the same time.
Awesome, thanks. Monica, you want to talk about how you had your kids, you divided up the parts of the presentation by groups?
Yes, and I do something similar to what Megan was talking about as well. Having those slide decks and having kids just be able to fill into the same slide deck so that there's one is amazingly wonderful for a time saver. But you could also, and then the presentations too, some teachers spend a few days, having the kids present the same presentation to the, like, all the kids did the presentation. They all did the same work. And so presenting the same work to an audience that's already done that work is really boring for them. So I would say consider having groups present to each other, like do 1 or 2 presentations. Consider bringing in like a small Shark Tank kind of a thing and have a couple of, just so they're not presenting to people who already know the material, because that's just a drain, a time drain. You could also have groups do different parts. So for example, if you've ever done 7-6, which is Joe and Becky and how they see colors differently, there are parts to that unit challenge that need to be finished. Like there's a CER, there's the Punnett squares that show the different combinations. So you could assign and kind of jigsaw one piece of that to different groups in the room, and then they share out, this was what our group came up with for the CER. Another group, this is what our group came up with for the Punnett squares and what they should look like. And then you can have a conversation about that, but then every group is not doing the exact same thing. So just a couple different ways to do that.
Thanks. And Ashley's going to show us one of the ways she does the unit closers.
Yeah, so this came out of being virtual for a year and figuring out how to do a gallery walk and group presentations virtually. So what I did was basically took every group's presentation, put a viewable copy on one assignment in Google Classroom, and they had to walk through everybody's presentation and do a peer evaluation for it. That was for 7-2A, where they each have a different actual presentation. They each have a different client that they have to present to. So it was helpful for them to see everyone's. But in the bottom picture, which I think goes to 7-6, like Monica was just talking about, that's one where everybody's is pretty much the same. So they had to, instead of critiquing the entire presentation, they just had to critique the CER component of it, and they had to pick one person's. It was, each group was on a different page on a Jamboard. You click through, you find one, you complete the peer evaluation about that group, give them feedback on it, and then I ended up sharing that feedback form with each group so that they can improve their final presentation. But it saves time on the standing in front of the room, the shy kid, the presenting, the 3 days that it takes to present to each other. And they still get to see other work, and they get to see, you know, the groups that struggled, they get to see groups that were successful and how they can improve theirs. It cuts down on the walking around the room time. If you're doing a poster presentation, it's easier to just sit in your seat and do a Google slide and click through it. You save that walking around piece and that classroom management piece. So those are ways I've kept it after doing it virtually, because it saves such a huge amount of time in the classroom.
Thanks, Ashley. All right. Grading is these can be time savers for you as a teacher. Also, every time you grade something, it has to be passed back. If you're not doing digital stuff, if you're doing paper and pencil stuff. And so you kind of want to limit that also. When you're doing that pre-post test and it's taking you a long time, you also don't have to do it as a pre-test. That's only if you're maybe collecting data for your evaluation or something. But even the post-test can be long. Sometimes it's going to take more than one class period because, kids will work slowly through it. You don't have to give all of the assessment, and you don't have to give it all on the same day. You can take those assessment items, keep those bundles intact, keep everything with one scenario intact. Don't cut out the questions, because the questions are scaffold for kids to go through that sense making. But you could do one bundle halfway through the unit. Look at this assessment overview table that's in every pre-post assessment now in the teacher version at the end, and decide, have I taught enough in this unit? could I give this bundle? You can do it that way. Or you can just say, you know, there's some overlap and I don't care so much about assessing, you know, these 1 or 2 things. And I think they're going to get assessed on it enough looking at the other items, and cut out one of the items if you need to make it shorter. That's also a great way to make accommodations for kids is cut out one of those bundles, and you're going to make a good decision on what you're cutting out using this assessment overview table. Don't grade everything all the time. Look at the stuff that kids are doing and think about, is this a compliance grade, like, or a participation kind of grade? If it is, you know, you can give them a few points based on, is it complete? Is it half complete? Is it not complete? That kind of thing. And just zip through that stuff. Spend your time assessing the things that MyStar has set up to be the 3-dimensional assessments. I would always grade the check your progress, but that's going to be about once a week, and those are small and quick. And then the pre-post test is once per unit. So that's, you know, maybe once a marking period almost. And then the embedded assessments you should grade also. But the other things are, you know, think about if this is really just a participation grade or a compliance grade. Did they do the stuff that they had to do in order to get to the sense making later? You know, that can be a real quick, is it filled out or is it not kind of thing. And every time you make things digital, kids get quicker feedback and you avoid that paper pass back time. So keep that in mind. Bell work. I did this for years, way before I did MyStar, but there was always a question on the board when kids walked in and they had a science journal that they kept in class that was just for the bell work. This could also easily be digital, but you can sandwich in some good opportunities to pre-teach, to reteach, to talk about directions, think about, you know, behaviors that your expectations, all of those things in that 5 minutes. At the beginning of class, and you're actually going to steal some of that time from passing time, because you know you have kids who come into class early, right? So if the minute they come in, they have a bell work assignment, you can review things that you think maybe they missed yesterday that you need to talk about again. You can do that, maybe that some of that anchor question stuff, you know, what do you know about this? What are your experiences with this? You can talk about, you know, you're going to do a lab today. What does it mean to be a good lab partner? What does that behavior look like? So having that little routine automatic at the very beginning of class is just a good management process, and it keeps things tight. And Megan has a way she does bell work too that she's going to share with you.
So it's just kind of a silly, I mean, I think it's silly, but I also think it's kind of fun. So this came from like when I did reading apprenticeship a couple of years ago, like looking at different types of text. So I have themes every day. So Mondays are Monday motivation. It's always a motivational quote, but it's always related to the unit somehow. Tuesdays are Taco Tuesdays. It's always food related. Wednesdays are midweek memes. Thursdays are Throwback Thursdays. It's always a song. Fridays are Friday funnies. It's a pain in the butt the first time around finding all these things to connect with the unit. But now that they're done, I do have them digitally, like I can reuse them. So I admit it took a ton of time for me to find them at first, but there's always a connection to the unit. It's in there quick, right? Because I know a lot of people who sometimes spend a long time on their bell work or their, you know, their little intro, but they're pretty quick. It's the same 3 prompts every day. What does it make you think about? Either what does it make you feel or how are you feeling today? And then making a connection. And sometimes I'll throw in something specific, like if I want to use it more of a formative assessment, right? Like, okay, yesterday we learned what natural selection is. Tell me how you can relate this song to natural selection. So they, you know, it's a nice way to get them seeing other ways to make connections between what they're doing and get creative with it.
And when you do that at the very beginning, you're kind of activating kids' knowledge, you're setting them up to learn. And so you can kind of speed things up, you know, the processes throughout the rest of the class period then. Thanks.
That's how I explain it to them, that's part of the purpose, right? As you came from math and half of you just came from gym, like I need you to get your brain reset for science and, you know, getting ready to learn.
So I did throw together some sample lesson plans, and we're running a little short on time. So I'm going to kind of leave these out there. But if you're wondering what does it look like to kind of manage a MyStar middle lesson, This one you'll notice is 4 days, and then on the 4th day, we're starting that anchor at the end, and then starting the next lesson, really launching into it on Friday. A unit opener, again, 2 days, maybe 3. Okay, you wanna keep it short, kind of cram it in there, move along. The big chunk of your unit opener is that bubble map or driving question board, and that should happen on the 2nd day, and then you should be ready to start the first middle lesson. And then that unit closer, you know, try to squeeze it into 2 to 3 days. Only allow 1 day for presentations, and make some adaptations like you heard today if you think it's going to take longer than that. And then leave a day for that post-test. And if the post-test is going to take your kids, you know, days and days, you know, cut some of it out, make good decisions, use that assessment table, overview table. All right, we are going to put you back in your groups for about 5 minutes or so to just jot down what do you see, think, wonder. And then when we come back, we'll have some breakout rooms set up that you can choose, and you can pick our brains a little bit more if you'd like. So I'm going to put you back in your rooms for just a few minutes. Please jot down what you see, think, and wonder about the unit streamlining that you've seen just now. And then we'll come back and we'll try to answer some questions. All right, we'll have everybody back in just a few seconds, and we are running really close on time. So I think what I'll do is I'll do my little thank you and feedback thing, and then we'll go into breakout rooms and people can stay as long as they can stay. And we'll just go a little bit over if you'd like. All right, everybody, thanks so much. We are running a little close on time. And so I do have breakout rooms set up. Before we do that, I am going to give my thank you speech that I would do at the end normally, and then we'll go into the breakout rooms, and we'll stay as long as you have questions. And if you need to go, you can go, and that's fine. So we do have some upcoming MyStar sessions. If you're interested, all of these are available for registration on the dashboard. And we do have a link here on this last slide for feedback. We definitely take your feedback very seriously. So if you would take a few seconds and fill that out at some point today, we'd love that. The breakout rooms that we came up with based on your wonderings and discussions, we're going to have room 1 with Ashley, and she'll talk about vocabulary and unit summary tables or anything else you'd like to ask Ashley. I'll run room 2, and we'll talk about assessments and accommodations and anything else you want to ask me. And then Monica is going to talk about digital things in room 3. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 rooms that you can choose from, and I'll open them up and pop in a room, pop out of a room, ask us some questions. If you need to go, we totally understand, and thank you for your time. And please join us again, and remember to do the feedback survey. So I will leave these breakout rooms open as long as people are interested. So thanks so much, and here we go.